The story you know is wrong. Not innocently wrong. The wolf was not the monster. Or rather, he was not the only one. The first arrived singing. The second arrived whistling. The third arrived in silence. He was already calculating. The first built with straw. There is no cruelty in saying so. He built with straw because he was the kind of creature who inhabits the present with absolute completeness, and the present offered a harvested field, golden and warm and smelling of late summer, within a few hours of walking. His house was alive with noise. It was filled with that disordered and immediate life that leaves no room for thinking about tomorrow. And for him, this was not a flaw. It was the only form of existence that made sense. The third knew this. He had walked with his brothers for 3 days before they parted, and in those 3 days he had watched, not with affection, not with judgment, but with the same methodical attention one gives to the sky before a storm. He noted how the first stopped to play with everything the path offered. He calculated. He understood. When they separated at the crossroads, the third embraced the first. He held him a moment longer than necessary, then let him go. Toward the golden field, toward the straw, toward the house that would not hold. It was not affection. It was a verification. That evening, the bird song stopped without warning, the way a candle stops when someone covers it with their hand. What came from the forest was not wind. Wind does not move with that direction, that precision, that quality of something that remembers. It was an ancient exhalation, a long and low breath carrying centuries of pine resin and deer bone, and earth soaked by rains that fell before there were names for seasons. The straw came apart as though it had never been real. Silence remained, and in the forest, something noticed. The second built with wood. He had the caution of someone who has seen enough to understand that easy things do not last, but not enough to understand why. He built true planks, a roof that held, a door with a bolt. He felt reasonable. The word he used privately was enough. And this is the most dangerous word that exists, because it implies that danger has a measurable threshold, that disaster will stop in front of whatever is sufficient. The third had walked with him longer than with the first. 2 full days, listening more than speaking. Listening to how the second reasoned, how he built his certainties on a foundation of sufficiency, of better than nothing, of this will do. He had understood that too. When they parted, the second said, "Be careful, brother." And the third said, "I will." And the strange thing, the thing the second noticed only for a moment, only a flash, before letting it go, was that the third's voice carried no promise. It carried something closer to a recording, as though he were cataloging the moment, filing it away into an order that already existed somewhere inside his head. The night the forest came for the second time, the wood had already understood what the pig had not. That dead matter cannot hold against something that has never died. The forest did not oppose the house with force. It opposed it with presence, with the weight of what existed before the planks, and will continue to exist after. The wood gave way with a sound like a sigh. crash. A sigh. And in that last moment, the second called his brother's name. His voice moved through the forest, echoed off the bare trunks, dissolved into the still air. Across the forest, someone heard. He did not answer. The third had finished building before his brothers had begun. Not with straw, not with wood, with stone, quarried from the bed of a river no path reached, carried brick by brick through a forest that seemed to step aside without a word, as though the woods themselves, for reasons of their own, had decided to wait. He fired the bricks at night, when the smoke dissolved into the dark without leaving a visible trace. The water for the mortar came from a spring he found by digging, as though the ground had surrendered to his insistence, as though the stone preferred to be built rather than continue waiting beneath the earth. The house had right angles, every corner 90 degrees, every joint sealed, no cracks, no opening that did not serve a precise and calculated purpose. None, except one. In the north wall, at ground level, there was an aperture. Not large, not small. Exactly the right size. A measurement the third had derived in the months before, in the silent days when he had followed tracks through the snow and measured the prints with a length of cord. Patient, methodical. The care of someone constructing something that has no name yet, but already has a shape. The aperture looked like a mistake. The only imperfection in a fortress that contained no other imperfections. It was not a mistake. It was an invitation, addressed to something intelligent enough to find it, curious enough to understand what it meant, and similar enough to the builder that it could not help but enter. The cauldron was already on the fire, the water already warm, juniper already ground in a linen cloth waiting on the table. Everything in its place, months in advance, because the third pig had always understood that the difference between those who survive and those who do not is not courage. It is knowing precisely what you are waiting for and preparing its arrival with the same care one gives a welcome. He sat at the center of the room. He waited. Outside, the forest had gone still. The creature that circled the house of stone had known many houses, all of them across all the forests of all the centuries in which it had kept watch at the border between what builds and what grows. It knew what a house of straw meant. It knew what a house of wood meant. It circled the house of stone 3 times. It searched. It found the aperture. It stopped. There was something in that opening that did not belong to the logic of that fortress. Too small for a door, too large for an air vent, too precise in its shape to have been left by accident. It was the only point where the geometry broke, where the builder seemed to have made a human error in a work that contained no human errors. The creature recognized it, not as a trap, as a mirror. As though the builder had intended to say, I know you are intelligent enough to find this. I know you are patient enough to understand what it means. Enter, because I want you to see what I have built, and I want you to understand by whom. 2 cold mines, 1 fortress, 1 opening that was an invitation. It entered. The passage descended slightly, leading below ground level into the belly of the house. The stone was cold. The air was warm. There was a smell of smoke, of burning wood, of juniper, and of something animal, and of something that was not animal. The strange and unsettling overlap of 2 natures that should not have shared the same space. The great wolf did not understand the change until the iron hatch above its head sealed shut with the low and final sound of a verdict. That house did not smell of appraised terror. It smelled of vinegar, of coarse salt, and of blades kept safe from rust. Pinned to the stone floor, its limbs locked in iron that bit into muscle, the old carnivore found itself suddenly bare before a ferocity that did not belong to the law of the forest, but to the geometric precision of the human. There was no anger in the pig's movements, only the methodical coldness of a craftsman who separates night from morning. The thick gray pelt, which for whole seasons had governed the shadows of the valley, was lifted and cut, centimeter by centimeter, stripping the beast of every trace of its terrible majesty until it lay trembling, reduced to raw and living flesh. As the stove began to roar, heating the water in the great cauldron and lifting the steam of the juniper berries that waited on the table, the pig leaned over the dying face of the creature. His small, dark eyes held no trace of triumph, only the absolute emptiness of a new beginning. He brought his lips close to the severed ear of the wolf, and before the silence of death extinguished that last flicker of consciousness, he whispered, "Now I become the king of the forest."